Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by AWS and SUSE. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting panel ahead, but before we get things rolling, we do have just a couple of housekeeping notes that I'd like to review. First off, today's session is being recorded. So if you miss any of our discussion, or perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand shortly after we conclude this live seminar today. Now, if you want to engage with us, there are a couple of options for you to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which you'll find on the right side of your screen. I'd like you to go ahead and check out that chat tab and let us know from where in the world you are joining us. If you have any specific questions, we do want you to direct your questions to the Q&A panel. Sending in those questions to that Q&A section just gives us the ability to sort through those and kind of maintain them a little bit better and ensures that we can actually answer them within the confines of our program today. If you click over in the handout section, you'll see there is a version of the slides available for download, so feel free to grab those. And of course, before we close things out today, we're going to be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of our conversation. So our topic is Modernize Your Applications with Cloud and Kubernetes. I'm joined today by Brian Six, Pre-Sales Engineer at SUSE, David Rocha, Senior Partner Solutions Architect at AWS, and our very own Mitch Ashley, CTO at Techstrong Group and Principal of Techstrong Research. So Brian, David, Mitch, thank you all for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Mitch, do you want to go ahead and get our conversation started?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Cody. It's great to be with everybody today. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be doing a couple things, and I'm privileged to be joined by both Brian and David. David is via audio today, so we'll be kind of hearing him check in from the booth, so to say, and adding his thoughts and comments in the discussion. Brian and I, of course, are here on video and audio. So just a little bit of background. Techstrong, working with SUSE and AWS, conducted some research across DevOps.com, CloudNative.com, SecurityBoulevard.com, our websites, and we have a very global audience, people who are in this app modernization journey, and we wanted to collect some information, get some perspective on where they are, what some of the issues are, some learnings from that, and then we're going to be talking about that. We're going to do it in a couple of ways. First, David, Brian, and I'm going to present some of the slides from this document that we call the Pulse Meter. Download that now, or you'll get a copy of it after the webinar attached to an email that you'll receive. It's just a couple-page document with some write-up and the charts that we're going to be discussing. And we're going to talk about some of this data. What does it mean? What are some of the learnings that we have? You know, both Brian and David have a lot of experience working with customers, working with people in this in that journey at various places. And then also Brian with SUSE may at the end is going to show us a few elements of SUSE technology that might help with this, some of the challenges maybe around security or managing some complexity. We'll kind of see where those issues take us. So you're going to get a little bit of flavor. The data is going to be in some slides, though this is not really a slide presentation. It's a discussion. The caveat is it's a discussion with you. So please join in the chat. We want you to say, when we're on a certain topic of, what percentage of your applications are blah, we're going to jump in and say, well, that's not the same for me. I'm saying this, I'm here. I have this issue you didn't mention. And we'll try to incorporate your commentary, your thoughts and questions into our discussion and have it together. So be sure and jump into the chat with your thoughts, perspective, and also you can use the Q&A tab to ask a question, either place, wherever we'll find you and your thoughts. So welcome, Brian. Welcome, David. Good to be started with you. I'm going to jump right into the slides here, go back into the data, if you will. And we're trying to get a feel. Now, this isn't just an AWS or SUSE audience. This is about 500 million individual people visit our sites across all of the Techstrong properties. So we have a good cross-section of folks. So what percentage of your production applications are running in the cloud today? what kind of stands out to me first is over 50% is 42%. So almost we're approaching half of the people that responded, have, a majority, meaning 50% or more in the cloud. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, 21%, there's some apps that will never move to the cloud as well. But also kind of the other second largest group was that 1 to 25%. So either you've got a lot there, or you're in that process of getting your initial group of apps. Maybe it's been over a couple of years. Maybe you're just getting started. Any reaction to that, Brian, David? Is this consistent with what you see customers in the field?
This is David. Yeah. From my perspective, a lot of AWS customers, are running both not only their production but test dev, and I guess that's kind of from my point of view where I am working with, cloud customers. So when you're engaging with cloud customers, occasionally we will run into some customers that are maybe doing either proof of concepts or they're deploying new applications, and some of the legacy applications that they may have too much technical debt to migrate, so they're really refactoring or replatforming to use some of the AWS services. Brian, sorry about that, cut you off.
No, it was a perfect option for you to take the lead here on this conversation. I think overall it's great numbers. I mean, if you look at it overall, 79% of everybody's running something up there. You take out the 21, and everybody's got, a good percentage has got something running up in the cloud. So they're finding the value. They're finding what it means. I think it's great numbers, overall, and it could be attributable to a lot of things. If you look at what for example, AWS has done as far as creating an automation aspect to make it easy to provision and deprovision, make it easy to adopt the services. Plus, and this is one of the things that we at SUSE leverage a lot, are the extensive APIs that are available for being able to integrate with the services that are running up in AWS. I think that is huge at helping the adoption. I think it's almost imperative to have something like that in order to allow integration with the back-end systems that maybe customers might have that they need to leverage when they want to provision things. I think it's a testament to what the cloud has been able to provide, plus the security aspect of it. You take a look at the IAM roles, the identity and access management roles inside of AWS, huge set of privilege capabilities, restrictions that you can place, the way that you can customize that. I think all in all, it's just I think people are figuring out that these are great places to go, and they have the security to back that. I just think it's I think those are great numbers to show overall.
I'm the analyst in the group here, so I'm supposed to be independent, but my first two migrations were to the cloud, to AWS, and which were quite a while ago now. But you think about the robustness of the cloud, right? There is so much there too, whether you're lifting and shifting a legacy app or modernizing part of it or replatforming or just building, from scratch cloud native to move up the next generation of that app. It's an amazing environment to work. So that's kind of what stood out to me in that data, is that, with folks having a good portion of folks having a majority of their apps there, pushing that up, as well as folks moving a lot to it. There weren't many in that middle ground of 25 to 50%, or not as many, which kind of says we're in this next wave, right, of adoption, which is fantastic. I'm going to jump to the next slide.
Real quick on that, Mitch.
Yeah,
I wanted to get David's take on this. I think that there's a lot of the first timers, in that 21%, those that haven't gone there yet. There's likely various reasons. I'm sure they're all, individualized why they've chosen or not had an option to go to the cloud just yet. But I think with the advent of some of the cost savings, David, like the spot instances and reserved instances, I think there are places where people can find a home there that is affordable for them if, in fact, cost is a part of that 21%. What are your thoughts?
No, I definitely think that. I think what's preventing that 21% is probably maybe not cost, maybe it's regulation, maybe it's the industry they're in. I would also like to understand within that 21%, how many of them are using SaaS? Like, how are they interpreting that question, right? So what percentage of your production applications? So if the respondents are, using some other, SaaS offering that they don't consider as their production application, but they're running it from the cloud, I wonder, how that, obviously we can't really dive into that detail, but, trying to speak to someone within that 21%, I would really like to understand, as far as from their responsibility, they may not be running production applications that are running in the cloud, but are there other applications within their company or their organization that are leveraging the cloud? I'd be curious to know that.
We didn't focus on SaaS specifically, David, in the questions. But we did ask the respondents how many were using AWS, right? So I'm guessing if you said you're using AWS, you probably weren't thinking SaaS. You're more thinking platform as a service or applications or all the, the whole stack. And, what percentage of your applications are in AWS? 27% said 66 or more, kind of dividing this up into carving this up a bit. A third said 20% said a third. So it's kind of a good, healthy mix across, between none and then a third, 2/3, 3/3, up to 100%. So I think a lot of perspective. I'm going to make the assumption, right or wrong, this is probably more focused on applications and things they're doing, less focused on SaaS. And I could be wrong. Assumptions are, what they say about assumptions. But
and I am excited about. I guess the percentage, it's only 42% that have 50% or more. So the majority of customers, there's a lot of opportunity for customers to kind of investigate AWS, SUSE, and determine, how they can leverage cloud. So that's interesting.
Absolutely. So while we're here, I'm jumping around just a little bit. Let's look at the percentage of production applications operating in a Kubernetes or containerized. I'm sure if you're using Kubernetes, you're a containerized environment. So the right three bars, the second, third, and fourth, again, kind of follow that same kind of U pattern of more than half is 26%. In the 1 to 25% is 27% of folks said they were in that kind of first quarter of their applications, 18% in that middle ground. Again, kind of showing a little bit of this major adoption curve. And maybe some of this is pandemic related too, right? People began their move to the cloud and getting more in there and pushing more applications up there. But there's a nice correlation to Kubernetes. So it isn't just lifting an existing application wholesome and containerizing it and stuffing it up there. It's people using Kubernetes and doing some element of modernization around it. What's your gentleman's take?
Well, when I look at that, I look at sort of the none part of it, and I wonder what are the inhibitors there. For a customer, it could be that the applications you want to utilize aren't cloud native yet. Cloud native meaning they don't run in a container. They're not Kubernetes ready. And that's not something that the end user can focus on. If you look at or control, right? The customers, the consumers are just leveraging what is available that has already been containerized. And I think part of that is just the adoption of getting more and more applications containerized. There are a lot of studies, a lot of statistics around the percentage of applications still yet to be modernized, and it's technical debt. It's all these reasons that, all the things that have, particularly for some of the legacy applications that have been around for a while, rebuilding all of those and understanding how to take advantage of microservices and refactor all your applications can be a huge undertaking and could years at a time to complete, particularly if there's no way to release small components of it, which is sort of, when you look at the benefit of Kubernetes and containerization and microservices, it's all about being able to do little releases here and there that don't affect the entire bigger picture. But when you go back to the whole monolith approach to development, you don't have some of those luxuries. It's all or nothing. It's everything all at once, or you just have to wait for a long period of time to get the entire application suite migrated and rebuilt, repurposed before you can take advantage of those microservices. So it's the adoption is really on the onus is on the application vendors to get their applications modernized. And then for those that are doing their own development, and there are many customers that we work with that do their own software development, and they've got to figure out how to create their own software, market it. Again, it's getting up to speed on cloud native, the microservices approach to delivering, a service. I think there's just a lot of ground to cover, from that point. But everybody that's been able to do it and has gotten there so far, they know the benefits. There's no question. And being somebody who came from a developer environment, writing software, and this was back before people were really doing object-oriented programming back in the day. What we were converting and building, if this had been available, I would have loved to have gone this direction. It would have been so much easier to do. I can see it from my history. I can see the value of what Kubernetes and, what containers and microservices bring. And Kubernetes is just a whole nother layer on top of that because it's the management platform.
David, I appreciate your perspective, and of course you too, Brian, is, there's just containerizing your apps, right, or your software as you move them to the cloud. That's a perfectly viable strategy, right, to kind of standardize the delivery and the management environment of how software is packaged. And then there's, of course, moving to cloud native, of which containers is a part of. Do you see a lot of people containerizing first as part of their modernization, or is it usually in conjunction with moving to cloud native architectures?
So from my perspective, what I see is a lot of customers that are born in the cloud, are kind of leveraging those, cloud native technologies, right? They're really kind of diving into open source, what's available, and developing against it. Some of the customers that are, I'll say established businesses, there's a sort of risk, and a lot of customers will move applications or migrate applications to AWS using our services. And honestly, a lot of the services like our AWS application migration services is really kind of taking what a customer is running, a current workload, and then replicating it into the cloud so that a customer can, refactor that application to leverage those AWS services. So there's a lot of customers that are still moving those current applications, and because there is an amount of effort and investment that has to be made in going through that, to that containerized strategy, whether it's Amazon EKS or Amazon ECS or whatever other container strategy they're going with. There is that level of investment, and a lot of customers, you see it more with new applications, containerizing the new applications and developing against it, even for established customers. rather than, taking the current application and saying, how can we containerize it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly makes sense in greenfield. You can start out right with technologies that you want to build around, and of course the variety of applications. I remember one of the first apps I moved was a .NET ASP, kind of an older one, right? And it was a lift to really figure out what we did to package it, to move it into AWS, and then we started actually modernizing a piece of it, moving just one factor of the app into microservices and kind of taking it further. So, any thoughts, Brian? And we'll jump into a little bit more data here because I want to guide the conversation to the next chart.
Yeah, I think all those things. I agree with all those comments and positioning. I think that, again, customers are only able to consume what's available as a Kubernetes or container-based delivery model. So some of them are more, again, off the shelf. They just leverage what's already there. Luckily, when you look at things like the as a service consumption, they don't know what it is, so nor do they have to care. But the beauty is, for those that have to manage and either build the application or run it, operate it, huge advantages. It's sort of one of those things, you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And then all of a sudden you wonder, why did it take me so long to figure this out? Why didn't somebody tell me? And of course, there's plenty of people trying to tell you. But I don't know. I think that the whole development of cloud native and the infrastructure that makes it work is just amazing once you understand, how it all is put together. It makes sense. It really does.
I want to jump to a question one of our audience members asked. What is the whole idea and concept behind app modernization? It's sort of like digital transformation is one of those terms that can be used a lot of ways, and we kind of got tired of that term, and now we're using, it's not that they're equivalent, but app modernization. David, what's your kind of working definition when you're talking with people about application modernization?
I would say, I'm trying to avoid using the term monolithic. So traditionally you would have applications that would, they would do everything and everything, like anything and everything. So if you would have a system outage, it would impact not only maybe, let's talk about, I don't want to talk about that. Let me pause there and let me come up with an example.
Okay, no worries. I know I threw that out there, but the audience
yeah.
member tossed that in, so no
yeah.
worries.
No, so the way that I would talk about it is where you're able to publish. So if you were to look at an application of posting, pictures, commenting on those pictures, and posting videos, right? Just something like that, right? Like I'll say Instagram. If you were to talk about that application, all of the services, whether it's the comments, whether it's the publishing of pictures, publishing of videos, connecting with other contacts, all of those are separate services that each of those systems are talking to, right? It's not, if one system goes down, or a large portion of your systems go down, like, I don't want to say that. Oh, if one system goes down, you're not going to be able to be, you might be able to comment on pictures, right? Each of those services are running unique and should be running in their own, fault tolerant environment, right? They should not have necessarily a dependency on each other, where previously older environments where if you had an outage, everything was down, right? One system, one component of that service was down, nothing was working. A lot of times you'll see applications that are built using like EKS or containerized applications where part of the services are running and then other features and functions of that service aren't. And that's really the way that I envision it.
Brian?
My sort of take on it is the app modernization approach is leveraging this new, I don't want to call it new because it's been around for 13 years or a long time, but the notion of, instead of building one single really large application, break your application into a lot of different logical constructs. We call them microservices. And all of those microservices need to understand that they live and breathe by themselves. As David was saying, no dependencies on each other. Therefore, you should expect that everything is just a service. Your entire application is just a bunch of little services with microservices in the name. And expect that there's downtime. Expect that there will be something not working. Handle that appropriately. Don't just blow up and have a big giant outage and the whole entire application goes down. And then the beauty of breaking everything up into their logical pieces, and then having each one of those logical pieces communicate with all the other logical pieces, is that all of those pieces can develop at their own rate of speed. They don't all have to have the same lifespan. Some of them can, adapt faster. An application that's got a UI interface can adapt a lot faster than the component that's on the inside of that application that handles credit card authorizations, which probably never changes except when there's changes in the industry, right? So there are pieces of it that may never change, pieces that change more slowly, pieces that change more rapidly, but they all interact with each other and they all expect that this is going to happen. So app modernization is getting to this new level of developing applications. And then Kubernetes takes it to a whole nother level, which deals with the orchestration of all those little pieces. Because now you've taken my single application, broken it up into 250 pieces. Well, now I've got to manage 250 pieces of it. So how do I do that? And thankfully, we have Kubernetes for that.
I think I'd summarize both listening to both your definitions. It summarizes of kind of getting applications to a point where they can better keep up with the pace of the business, whether that's through fully architecting or elements of it starting to move it, but also trying to also deliver new capabilities, digital experiences through the apps and the portfolio of what we leverage, and figuring out what parts of apps that might also need to be more resilient, right? Maybe are failure prone and now need to be more resilient in supporting our customers or the business, et cetera. So there can be a lot of places where you are on that journey. It could be technology refresh. It could be, we're doing a lot of new services. We're going to build them this way, right? Or somewhere in between. So app modernization is a little bit of kind of eye of the beholder of where you are or where those applications are in their maturity. I'm gonna jump to this part of the data. And by the way, all of this data is in this document called the Pulse Meter that you can download in the handout section. We'll also email to you. We're talking about containerization. What are some of the goals for containerizing apps? Automate container lifecycle management, unify hybrid and multi-cloud workloads, modernizing legacy environments, migrate applications to the cloud. Were some of the top things that came out of that. I know there are other reasons as well. Any comments on the why of containerization? I mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of simplifying or standardizing your app delivery and your software delivery through a containerized environment, whether you're moving to Kubernetes or not, kind of getting to that place.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of this depends on how much a customer or an organization is aware of the value of containerized applications. The more you become aware of the advantages, the more you start to realize, I want to be there. I want to be a part of that. There's a participant here, 391, asked about containerizing monolithic applications. Is that not modernizing it? And it's a good start, but once people understand that if I truly build my application in a containerized fashion, then there's an entire world that opens up to me that isn't available, even if I just simply containerize the entire monolith. If I take it all and put it all together, that's great. It's a great start because it gets me into the ecosystem. But for that application to really leverage what containers brings to it, it needs to be divided into logical partitions so that there's no dependencies, that are directly on each other. And then that container can then, or that application that's now made up of a bunch of logical partitions, can run in various places, have different SLAs and lifespans. It opens up the entire world to what it can be, what can be done to help provide its existence versus just being in the monolith, or whatever you want to call that approach to application delivery. So I think once people understand what containerized applications can do and what it means from a delivery standpoint, uptime, scalability, all that kind of stuff, I think it will grow over time. So I think some of this is just knowledge and awareness of what some of the benefits are of becoming more containerized, more cloud native.
Okay, very good. I want to jump to, there was a comment from participant 6 about Kubernetes and when do you use it, and then we also had a comment about balancing with cost, and that was some of the kind of challenges, if you will, that folks brought up around modernizing your apps, is how to deal with legacy applications or automation of applications, some of the cost factors. Maybe you aren't a Kubernetes shop, right? And so you've got to learn that ecosystem, and that's, it's not news to anyone. That can be complex. And also the security aspect of it. I'm going to show another slide on security, and then we'll talk about both of these. How important is security, right, for your containerized applications? Number one priority, 48%, right? Some new environment people are moving their apps into, right? So how do I manage security into that? And you could argue same thing for Kubernetes as well, in the top 3. So between top 1 to top 3, you're looking at over 80% of the respondents right there. So it is important. It is a big priority, maybe even a current concern for some organizations. So why don't we turn our eye to the topic of security? And I'd love to get maybe if you want to start, Brian, your perspective on that.
Well, I think there's no question that security is important to most everyone. Or we wouldn't have firewalls. We wouldn't have virus scanning. We wouldn't have malware scanning. We wouldn't have access control rules. Security is obviously a big part of it. Luckily, you've got David and his entire AWS team building a highly secure environment for people to run their workloads, whether they're containerized or not. So there's security in general there. But Kubernetes, or containers in general. So Kubernetes is just a way to orchestrate all your containerized applications. But a lot of people don't understand sometimes how that architecture works, how one container actually can talk to another container. And if there's 50 containers, they're all talking to each other. There's a whole conversation workload going on there that isn't being addressed by your perimeter firewall, doesn't know anything about it. Your network scanning doesn't know anything about it. Your virus scanning in your email doesn't know anything about it. So there's an aspect that maybe is just sort of an unknown for a lot of people, that they're not aware of what containers, as well as what if they use a Kubernetes style orchestrator, what that means in terms of the architecture and how they need to address that in terms of what security means. And when I think of security, I think of data transfer, data moving from place to place, knowing what's in that data, what it was traveling around the network, who has access to that information, all those kinds of things. What do you
David?
think?
Yeah.
Yeah, and And I think part of this always comes back to, we always think about the shared responsibility model at AWS, where, the customer is responsible for certain things, right? And if we were talking about just, let's say, Kubernetes deployed on um, Amazon EC2, right? So instances. So it's their own Kubernetes, which some customers do, right? They take on much more of a responsibility to handle, securing the control plane, scaling out the control plane, dealing with, any type of issues or security issues that may come up, whether it's fixes, patches, that they have to kind of manage and maintain that. Um, so the way that we see it, it's somewhat different. So we do have that shared responsibility where, AWS manages the data centers. We do have that kind of platform, and the services that you're using, for example, Amazon EKS, we're managing that control plane for you. So we're patching, dealing with day zero, vulnerabilities. We're patching those systems. And as far as customers, customers are managing those applications, they're managing those worker nodes. And that's kind of how we look at as far as security for the containerized application. But I think that's where, products like NewVector come in with SUSE, right? Where they do have to manage the security or even, Amazon Guard Duty, where customers have to manage that security within their application environment, right? That's not something that at AWS, we're managing. We're providing services, to do that. There's APIs that you can pull in other services like AWS Inspector, things that you can use to secure your environment, but ultimately it is the responsibility of the customer. And I think that's why a lot of customers are choosing Amazon EKS. And part of that is managing the control plane, right? That's being able to, build, scale out that control plane so that, the different API endpoints for those different services can communicate, etcd, anything that you think about as far as complexity with Kubernetes and the control plane, we're kind of taking on that responsibility for the customer. And that's really why a lot of customers look at Amazon EKS, but that doesn't mean that a customer shouldn't look at the security portion as far as managing that application.
Yeah, I like that approach, David. I love the shared responsibility term that you have, because I think that really highlights that there's responsibility on both parties. And EKS at least takes some of that away from the customer, where you have control over that and can manage it. And I think it's important because just staying upgraded, staying on top of patches and updates is huge. And leveraging EKS means the customer doesn't have to deal with a lot of that. Participant 6 was talking about, yes, there is all this security on the outside, but I don't say it's an afterthought, but had security been built more so into the application, which is why you hear terms, instead of DevOps, you hear DevSecOps. The idea of move your shifting left, move your security and the validation and verification of that more into the development process of the application. Find out sooner, build it into the application sooner, so that it's not part of I've got to go fix this later. So DevSecOps and shift left is certainly a big part of it. I'm not going to mention any, but a couple breaches of security over the past 5 years or so come to mind, where had you done a shift left, had you been in a development process that checked for vulnerabilities and were doing security early in the development process, would have saved you a lot of time and a lot of heartache in the media and the press.
I think we're going to have participant 6 on our next panel with us. They have a lot of good perspective. This might be a really good time. Brian, I'd love for you to maybe shift here. SUSE had some really nice announcements last week.
Yeah, before we do that, I want to go back to participant 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, you're absolutely right. So it's more than just security, and that's why, using a service like, AWS CloudTrail, right, where you're able to capture all of those. And I know that's not within the application, but when you're looking at it from the domain of, okay, what calls, what behavior is happening within my application, what interactions are being captured, and move to CloudTrail, and then running a service like, Amazon Guard Duty to kind of identify those malicious behaviors, or not, I don't even want to say malicious, just out of the ordinary behaviors, things that, what is that? It may not be malicious at all. It's just unexpected. I think that's, that's really where, customers are looking at AWS saying, okay, we may not develop this application that does that, or we may not want to, develop this service that performs this specific function. Where can we move to so that we can choose what services that we can pull in, like, CloudTrail or S3 or Inspector. Those are the things, and those are the reasons why customers are looking at AWS.
Mm-hmm. And they're there. Not only are they there as a catalog, if you will, but they're often there as kind of pre-integrated into the console, or to get you started quickly. You're not starting from scratch oftentimes, or you have partners that can help you.
Yeah. And I'll say, yes, that's absolutely correct. And we always work backwards from the customer. So any of these services that are being launched, they're all born from a customer issue, or a set. I don't want to say a customer, a set of customers that are requesting a specific function or a specific service. And we always look at, from the customer, what are we seeing from the customer? What problems are we trying to solve? And that's why we launch the services.
Excellent. Brian, do you want to do a little show and tell? New Relic was mentioned earlier, I think it was, if I remember right. Talking about some of the security aspects of containerized environments, just understanding the environment that you're working with.
Well, I can show here a little screen. Let me set this up here. How does that look, Mitch? Can you see that?
Yep. I said New Relic. I meant New Vector. Thank you.
New Vector. I'm with you.
Too many news.
Too many news. So this is a dashboard, if you will. It's under our network activity tab, but the idea is this is a very small containerized environment. It's got Kubernetes underneath there to orchestrate it, but these are a container, basically a plain Jane, haven't put anything on it, just barely built a container environment that's got Kubernetes orchestrating everything. And as you can see from a plain Jane, don't have anything even running on it, there are all these lines with arrows on here that we have discovered the application, we understand what protocols it's using, and these are all the communications going on inside or in between the containers that make up the application. In this case, it's really just the orchestration components for Kubernetes. But if I look at another view, here is a Kubernetes cluster of a bunch of container applications, and these are all the conversations going on. This is basically, and I've heard it called a data center inside of a data center. This is all happening within the confines of that Kubernetes environment or the container environment, whatever orchestrator you're using. These are the conversations going on. There is data transferring and moving all over the place, and people don't realize this. One of the beauties, for example, of Kubernetes is that obfuscates all of this from you. You shouldn't have to know how to manage this, but you certainly need to know how to secure it to ensure that there aren't communications going on and data passing that shouldn't. And how do you become aware of such data passing? Or as David was just talking about, sort of the anomalies, whether they're malicious things or not. What do I know that's normal? How do I identify things that aren't normal and capture that? And so you need a tool to do that. We certainly have one, but would love to use to leverage ours, but find somebody's tool that allows you to see into the interworkings. I've basically shown this to people who were the developers and builders of applications, and they didn't even know that their applications did some of this. They didn't know some of this communication that went on. They weren't even aware of it. So it illuminates a whole lot of information about the applications and their use within your environment and what they do. And you should be able to go to any point in this conversation, right-click, and get some more details of the conversation that's going on. Maybe even doing a packet capture. Let me track and capture information so that I can do analysis on it. We do this kind of security on your traditional network at the firewall level. What needs to be done is it needs to happen within your Kubernetes environment, because look at this. If you weren't told any different, you would think this is just a network infrastructure map. This is a bunch of servers with a firewall somewhere, and this is just your standard network. When in reality, this is a 6-node Kubernetes cluster with half a dozen applications installed on it, and this is the data and the traffic that is being generated by a half a dozen applications on top of that cluster.
I almost would describe it as kind of a platform approach, right? To a containerized environment, and whether it's scanning for vulnerabilities or doing data protection or identifying where data lives and traverses, et cetera. You need a way of not only knowing what you have, but what's happening inside of that. David, I think I stepped on you. Go ahead and jump in.
No, I think you're spot on, right? So this definitely, a product like NewVector is really what we, talk about as far as, the shared responsibility, right? Being able to map all the communication, all of those connection points. I mean, this is it.
Were you going to say more, Brian? Did we cut you off?
No. I think I said plenty about it, but.
Well, I think one of the things also important to me, anyway, I know it's important to a lot of customers, is open source, and NewVector is, I believe, open source, correct?
Yes.
So for a lot of folks, that's a requirement. I need that option in my stack for certain things that I'm looking for. Talk about the security specifically. Is it around data where it's traversing both inside the Kubernetes clusters as well as traversing externally? Or
there are different tools out there that customers can leverage, and they all attack this at different levels. Some of them are attacking security, I want to say, retroactively. It's the scanning approach. It's the idea of looking for something that is known to be bad. It's already happened. It's already existed in the wild somewhere and been documented. So these are things like CVEs, network attacks, those kinds of things. But that's sort of done at a scanning layer. And there are many people that do scanning stuff like that. So it's important to be able to do scanning for this kind of activity. We've actually chosen to scan at the network layer so that we can look for things as they're traversing the wire, if you will, in terms of from one container to the next. But there are others that are trying to accomplish that at different levels, and everybody has different capabilities based on where they're trying to attack this. We're trying to look at it at the network traffic, at the payload level. I want to know, I don't want to just see the tractor trailer drive down the road. I want to see what's inside of the container that tractor trailer is pulling, because that's what I care about. So it's not enough to know the IP address of the source of the destination. I want to know what's in the packet. What's the payload that you're getting.
Manifesto, right? What's inside of it, the Docker file or the container D.
So it depends on from a customer's perspective, what does security mean to you? What do you want to know? Scanning may be enough. Maybe that's all that you want to capture. NewVector would say, I would love to do scanning, but I also want to understand, where do all these arrows go on the screen that I was just showing you? I'm pointing to the screen now, but I'm not sharing it, so you can't see it. But NewVector says, well, I know where your application, when we were doing a discovery, if you will, where things were going. I can then lock that down and capture any anomalous behavior. And I don't know if it's malicious or not, but at least I can tell you that something is going on that didn't happen during the normal day-to-day activities. You should be alerted to it. Here's the information. Go find out and determine if it's something that's a problem or not. Or lock it down. Don't even allow it. If you discover something anomalous, just stop it. Tell me about it, and then I'll go figure out if, why is it anomalous? Why is it something that I didn't capture before? And maybe it's normal behavior, and I'll add that to the normal behavior list. And maybe it's not, and I need to be on top of it because something's happening. So security can be addressed at different levels, and there are many different players in this space that are doing security scanning, what they call real-time scanning and the like. And we play in that same space. And the beauty is that NewVector is a cloud-native application. It is a Kubernetes app. It runs inside of Kubernetes. It's a containerized app. In fact, it's a containerized app more so than it is Kubernetes. So it's a container app. Runs wherever you got containers running. I've got customers that want to run, ECS up in Amazon. Great. NewVector can help you out. It's not that I have to have Kubernetes. I just have to have you run in a container, and then I can start playing in the sandbox with you.
David, anything you want to add? We're gonna do a little bit of a wrap up here in just a minute before we move off this security topic.
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, very good. Let me jump to, and there's more data here than we're gonna have time to present. I do want to jump into just tell everybody that we will offer this document in an email that you'll get as well. I think give you guys a chance to kind of think about what you might want to see to wrap up here. People are at different points in the journey, and it's not a go it alone sport, right? And modernizing by yourself sometimes is not the best strategy. So I'd love to hear it from each of you. What are some partnering kind of approaches that people can take to leverage and get benefit from what other people have experienced modernizing apps moving to the cloud? So think about that for a moment. And David, I'll start with you when we get to that. I just want to mention to everybody, we do have 4 Amazon gift cards that we're giving away at the end of this, not very far away from now, just in a few minutes. Cody will come back on, so stay tuned and find out about who our winners are. And we'll go to our last question. So David, if I can ask you to share your thoughts on how do you get the benefit of what others know about doing this?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 ways, right? So there are AWS workshops that are focused on, containers, whether it's, Amazon EKS, whether it's Amazon EKS plus, Amazon Guard Duty. So there are workshops that, customers can request or talk to their account team, as well as, there are partners who deliver those workshops. And going back to the partner side, right? So we do have AWS container competency partners. So these can be service partners that, either have experienced and shown expertise as far as whether it's app modernization, whether it's helping customers secure their environment, whether it's migrating, from on premises to AWS. So there are an AWS container competency partner by category, and of course we also have ISV containers, so software categories as well. So you'll see SUSE is part of our enterprise container management category with their Rancher product. So there's a lot of if you were to go to the AWS or Amazon, aws.amazon.com, and search for partners and search for AWS container competency partners, you will see a lot of those partners and as well as those workshops that help cover the AWS services that allow you and walk you through getting your hands on some of those services.
Great, Brian.
So just taking some notes here. I think part of understanding where to partner is what kind of partnership is someone looking for. If some of this could be around skill sets and development, training, all those things. David just talked about some of the things that Amazon offers at SUSE. SUSE has been around for a couple years, like 3 decades now. Mm-hmm. So we've seen the ride from beginning to where we are today. And so we know something about partnering and helping people get up to speed. And there are, in addition to the things that AWS offers, SUSE we have these rodeos to help you understand Kubernetes, to help you understand how we can help you manage Kubernetes, for example. There are rodeos on NuVector to help you understand how NuVector can be applied as a security tool. I'm hoping that the other security vendors around containers are providing similar kinds of training because, we need a lot of this is about enablement. Many of the slides we looked at earlier, Mitch, were all about, or not all about, but there were aspects of it where people, if they don't understand what containers can deliver, adoption could be slow. So there could be people that don't understand how the cloud can help them, so adoption can be slow. So a lot of this is just enablement, getting the word out and helping people understand what's available. We've got, like I said, we've got these rodeos that we provide. We've got training classes that you can take to get certifications. AWS has their certifications as well, which is a beautiful thing. Again, it's all about skill set development. One of the questions that I saw up there was regarding skill sets around developing containerized applications. And that's certainly something that's outside of the scope of what SUSE does. We don't have any classes or training on how to write microservices. Some of it's a methodology and some of it's a practice, and there are ways to go in and develop to that and get training on that. I don't know, David, if there's anything that Amazon offers. Nothing. SUSE doesn't have anything from the development standpoint, but there are certainly resources out there, and it's all about getting up to speed and skills development is a huge thing here.
Okay. Let's do this. We're just about out of time. I want to respect folks getting on to their next Zoom call or whatever meeting, whatever it may be. Any parting thought you want to add, David, or should we turn it back over to Cody?
I think we can turn it back over to Cody.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cody, it's yours. All yours, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitch. And David, Brian, thank you both so much for joining us on Techstrong Learning today. It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you before we go live and to have you on the program with us as well. So again, thank you both so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you guys for inviting us. Enjoyed it. It was great.
And we have some gift cards to give away, sir.
We sure do. So our 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing, they are Uttam K, Mark W, Lynn N, and Arnell C. So you will be receiving an email to collect that gift card. It should make its way over to you in the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see that, just check your spam folder in case it happens to get filtered out. I'd like to thank AWS and SUSE for sponsoring our program today. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the Techstrong Research team for conducting our research for today's Pulse Meter, as well as a shout out to our Techstrong community for responding to those polls for us. I also did want to remind everyone that this session was recorded. You will be receiving the recording via email shortly after this, so just kind of hang tight for that. As for our audience, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time, and we do want to ask you to fill out our survey that will come up as soon as we close out. So if you just stick with us, it will pop right up. Either way, we hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and to our panelists, thank you all once again.
Thank
See you
you,
guys.
Andy.